Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Peak District National Park Authority on Friday the 26th of September. My apologies, I was working to the clock behind me, which of course I think now says it's 10 o'clock as opposed to the one that's facing me, which says it's after 10. We never seem to be able to coordinate these clocks, but hey, it's a minor issue. It's straight into the agenda then. I've had apologies for absence from Bill Hanley, Ian Huddleston, Melandra Smith, Hannah Corran, Charlotte Kelly, Andrew Hart and Jean Warmby. Does anyone bring any other apologies from members? If not, we can move on to agenda item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 11th of July 2025. Are there any corrections that need to be made? Janet Dugdale.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, page 11, under item E, under the resolutions, the Secretary of State members for the Governance Working Group have put me on there, and it shouldn't be me, it should be Ginny Priestley.
Thank you for that, Janet. Obviously, old habits.
I did.
Any other corrections that need to be made to those minutes? If not, subject to that correction, can I have someone to move the recommendation of acceptance? Janet, seconded. Charles, thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. I've not been informed of any urgent business. Members' declarations of interest. Are there any declarations that any member wishes to make? If not, thank you. I take that as no. Public participation, not been informed of any, which moves us on to agenda item 6, Chair's briefing. Relatively brief. Apart from the usual round of briefings with the Chief Exec and other duties, July and August for me has been quite busy in one respect. There's been a continuing and fairly heavily involved engagement with leading on a National Parks England internal issue, which has taken up an inordinate amount of my time, though luckily that's now coming to an end. So it frees me up for other things. Amongst other things, on the 15th of July, along with the Chief Exec, I attended a National Parks England meeting in London, a visioning meeting to do just that, to create a vision for National Parks England. It was deemed by the new chair, Vanessa Rowlands, who is also the Chief Exec of South Downs, is the chair of South Downs National Park, her initiative. Through July and August, there has been a series of steering group meetings, local plan steering group meetings, that I have attended along with other members. The product of which is before us as agenda item 10, but there has been almost weekly meetings of the steering group attended by members representing the membership in many respects, working with officers to develop the document that's before us today. On the 21st of July, I attended the initial meeting of the Peak District Research Framework project, which members might recall is a 2-year project funded by Historic England to produce a research framework for the Peak District National Park, focused on cultural heritage of the National Park. It's intended to inform the cultural heritage approach to, amongst other things, planning applications, to ensure that the responses are focused and that the work that is required as part of the development management process is focused and appropriate, rather than having us accused of a scattergun and ad hoc approach. So it's formalising and focusing that work. On the 23rd of July, again, Phil, our Chief Exec, and I met with Councillor Graves, who's the new leader of Derbyshire County Council, which was a very useful, productive meeting. that initial getting to know one another as well, which was, as I say, beneficial, I think, to both parties. And then 29th of July, another National Park England board meeting, and also one on the 28th of August, which was to deal with the issue I was involved in. On the 5th of August, with the Chief Exec, as is noted in his Chief Exec report, which follows this, we met with Marie Tidball, MP, at Langsett, looking at a set of local issues, but also things that impact on the wider national park, as is outlined in Phil's report, so I shan't go into that detail. 29th of August, I responded positively to an invitation from Lord Burlington for lunch at the Chatsworth Country Fair, which was quite apart from anything else, was, I will assure you, a useful networking opportunity. I shall say no more. 3rd of September, again with the Chief Exec, we attended, as is noted in his report, attended a meeting of the to do with the Buxton Very Light Rail initiative, which was initiated by Mayor Clare, the East Midlands Combined Counties Authority. Again, it was looking to see what and in what way and how that initiative could be progressed. And again, that was very positive, as is outlined in Phil's report. And then just to conclude, Monday and Tuesday of this week, both Phil and I spent spent effectively 1 day travelling and 1 day in meetings. National Parks England board meeting in the New Forest National Park was an exercise in reviewing, amongst other things, the form and function of National Parks England, but it's a very useful way of bringing chairs and chief execs together to identify areas of mutual interest and the ways in which National Parks England can represent the family of national parks in its representation with, amongst other things, with government. And of course, as I think Phil will explain in a moment, while we were there, the Section 245 issue from the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act to do with the having regard or promoting national park interests, that began to loom large in our iconography. And Phil will say more about that as I hand the baton over to him now. Phil.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. So just a few updates from the report. You've had the report here. I tried to write this report with new members in mind, actually. We use a lot of jargon. I end up using a lot. You think everyone understands everything that you've been working on for years, but actually if you're new to the organisation, you might not. So I tried to explain a few kind of contextual items in this as well. So just to update from what's written here, the Protected Landscapes Partnership, the search for a chair for that is the partnership between English National Parks, National Trails, what were AONBs are now called National Landscapes, and Natural England. So that's a really important partnership that will be a voice across government and bring all of those collective interests. Collectively, that's 25% of England land coverage, and so is much more powerful than any of us individually. They're looking for a new chair. Applications have closed. I'm told they had 43 applications, which I think is more than people expected and a really good sign. There'll now be a process of that DEFRA will undertake to appoint that chair. The National Parks England update is it is really what the chair was saying there around the new duty that we've only had for under 2 years now. This is a duty now that other bodies have to further the national parks purposes. So there is, it's being reported that the government are seeking to remove that duty now, and that's it looks like that's come from pressure outside of DEFRA actually, and so we're mobilising as national parks and with partners and other organisations to try and retain that duty, which we think is very useful. It gets other parties really thinking about the purposes of the national park and having to consider them. So we are mounting whatever work is being mounted, and we're actually writing to all of our local MPs raising their awareness of this and asking them to do what they can to support the maintenance of this duty. And National Parks England is also writing collectively at a ministerial level, and then people outside, you know, like the Campaign for National Parks and others, are doing whatever they're doing to raise the profile of this as an issue. DEFRA have also now just launched 2 new research projects. They've just come in the last week. So you'll remember DEFRA have had an interesting governance reform of national parks. That now looks like they're taking that forward by undertaking some research. They're commissioning someone to do what they're calling culture, visions and governance research. So that'll involve them talking to us and others and focus groups and so on. One hopes that then informs the recommendations that we expect on any kind of governance change, which we've always said needs to tie in with what's happening with local government reform in areas like the Peak District, which is also going to impact, and we want that to dovetail and, you know, be mindful of both of those processes. And the other research project they're looking at is reviewing the capital expenditure. So they gave National Parks a revenue cut this year, but some extra capital, and they're doing a piece on looking at what's been the impact of that capital. One would hope with a view to justifying the case for it and getting further capital in the future. There is still no news to update you on in terms of what we might hear about our settlement, when we might hear it or what we might hear. There is just no news. It's not even I've got news that I can't tell you. There is no news on that, so we just wait to hear how that goes. The piece in here on MCA update, and then on tourism and user impact. I was at the regional tourism conference this week where the mayor spoke, and she made 2 points that I thought were very interesting and that we need to be really aware of. So she said she wants the fastest growing visitor economy in the country. So she wants the East Midlands to be the fastest growing visitor economy. So there's a lot of growth there. It be that growth in numbers of visitors or growth in spend of visitors, you know, that's a growth agenda there for the visitor economy. And the other thing is she wants this region to have the UK's greenest tourism economy. So I don't know what that means yet, but I think those 2 things are interesting. Growth, but also sustainability and greenness. And I think we've got a really important role to play in making sure the national parks' special qualities are understood, and that we're delivering our purpose around conservation and protection, while also, you know, seeking growth in an appropriate way. On wildfires, there's been a call this week that I was on at a UK level, to try and develop a UK-wide position on wildfires, which we don't have. We know we've had over 30 in the Peak District this year. We've seen North York Moors, Cairngorms, other areas really affected. There's no UK wildfire strategy, and there's no kind of collective national parks position on it. So I think that'll be a really good development if we can get something agreed, whether that's calling for a ban on disposable barbecues or not. That's the kind of thing that we can think about and get a collective position, because what we don't want is different national parks to be saying different things on wildfire if we can help it. And they were the pieces to update on since this report was written, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I know both my briefing and Phil's exec report is for information only, but are there any burning questions or comments? Kath Potter.
I just wondered if you are in a position to tell us how much has been ascertained to maintain Snake Pass. Yeah?
I'm not in a position to tell you that. I know you'll see that is something that the regional mayor, who has and will have the budget for highways and transport, that is something that they're saying is one of their priorities. That came out in this Peak Partnership or Peak Summit that she organised with the regional mayors from South Yorkshire or Sheffield and from Manchester, and that came out as one of their priorities. In terms of how much is being allocated, I don't know.
Is there anything we can do to support this? It is a vital part of the national park.
I think we have to wait and see what's being proposed when it comes, and then we've got the planning process and our role to comment on things. But we'll have to wait and see, what it actually is landed on this by the mayor.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair. I have seen somewhere the amount of money. I can't think off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's a priority.
Is it?
And funds are allocated.
Okay, thanks for that, Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kath. Kath, could you put your microphone off, please?
Oh, sorry.
Kath, your microphone? Thank you. Ken Rustage.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, could I concur with that point? I was speaking to my mayor, Andy Burnham, only yesterday. He mentioned also the Peak Partnership at this point, can I really welcome that? I know some people, when we did the training last week, I think it was someone online, some members said that Greater Manchester or the Peak District is not part of Greater Manchester. Can I reassure them that they're obviously not very good at geography, but nearly 1/4 of my borough of Oldham is in Greater Manchester, or it certainly was as of yesterday, unless something's happened.
And hopefully of this morning as well.
Just looking at this point, and my colleague from West Yorkshire behind me, that Kirklees has a part, and we've talked obviously with the South Yorkshire, but I just wondered about West Yorkshire, because if we go through Saddleworth, you go up to the boundary, that's an important part of the Peak District in the Dark Peak too. So I don't know if they were involved. But, speaking to Andy, he's very keen, on the Peak District, and, obviously with a population now of 3 million throughout the whole of GM, and, sadly, with many children not having much of a holiday or something, it's on the doorstep, and we really need to, enrich and look, not just for us now, but for the future generations, to push that forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. I've always thought that there are 4 mayoralties that impact on the national park, and West Yorkshire is the 4th one that sometimes seems to get overlooked. I don't know if you want to say anything, Phil?
Well, it was the regional mayor who pulled together those partners, so we didn't have any say in who she included in that.
Sure.
We can make that point that there are 4 mayors that should be brought together when looking at.
And I have
the
made
national
that
park.
point to her some time ago. Matt Buckler.
Yeah, it's a point about the section you made around nature recovery. The local nature recovery strategies are starting to be approved now. So Derbyshire has just approved its local nature recovery strategy, and we've got our one plan for nature, which currently talks about the local nature recovery strategies but doesn't link to them. The role that we've had in feeding into those local nature recovery strategies has the person doing that role, or that role being there, has been really important in terms of integrating all that together. And so that's quite a big gap, isn't it? How are we going to make sure that we do what we need to do to make sure that the local nature recovery strategies are embedded in the one plan for nature, so that we can put some targets with it and make sure that we're doing what we can to deliver it. And as the chair of the local nature partnership for the Peak District, which we haven't met yet, so I'm looking forward to that, is there a role for it in that?
Thanks, Matt. Really good points. I think we have had a really positive role to date on supporting and influencing the 6 local nature recovery strategies. And we've had a member of staff who's been doing that very well. Unfortunately for us, she's now seconded to work at a National Parks England level. And we do have a gap, therefore, in our ability to now look at the Peak District National Parks Local Nature Recovery Plan and really turn that into action. So I think it's fair to highlight that is a piece of work we still need to progress, and we need to work out how we do that, with Sarah Bird having been seconded out. It's a sign of success, when really good staff have other opportunities outside the national park. It always leaves you with a problem with backfilling, particularly if it's for a short period of time where you don't know how long it is for. So we haven't quite got there yet into how we're going to resource the next bit, which is the plan, the actions. But we are, as I say in this report, we are taking nature recovery forward in lots of ways across the national park, through FIPL, through woodland creation, through farm advice, through the planning process. There's lots of ways in which we promote nature and nature recovery. But unfortunately, that loss of a staff member at the moment is something we still need to address.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Ginny Priestley.
Thank you, Chair, and CEO, for a very comprehensive list of what you've been doing. You've obviously had a very busy summer. A couple of points. First of all, having been the local nature recovery representative for the Peak Park, I would completely agree with the points Matt's made. And I think there's all tribute to Sarah Bird, who's played a very important role in all the different areas that she's worked with and been highly respected for the work she's done. My point was on really following on from what you've actually said about the Mayor's comments of her two priorities about growing visitor economy in a green way. How are we as a national park going to engage with that? Because it's not something that you can just tag on to another department within. We need to become much more commercially savvy as our funding reduces. So how are we going to address that?
Thanks, Ginny. So we have already input into the destination management plan for the region, okay, which is kind of the strategic document for the visitor economy. What the Mayor now wants to do is look for a document that combines the Nottinghamshire and the Derbyshire destination management plans. So that will be another opportunity to make the points we need to make around the role of the Peak District National Park. We also have the local growth, or the Regional Local Growth Commission that the Mayor's developed, and we've input into that and are still doing that, and I'll be going in a couple of weeks to the launch of that. I then sit on things like the Mayor's Nature and Biodiversity Task Force, and I'm able to make relevant points around the impact of visitor economy growth. I also do that through being on the LVEP, the Local Visitor Economy Board partnership. So I'm kind of doing it all the time. I think that it's not yet clear what some of this stuff that's being said actually means, and until we see some of that, it's hard to know exactly what the implications are. We're also at the same time, through Brian and others, taking forward the area management approach, which is the kind of on the ground how you deal with some of these pressures and some of the growth. So that kind of work we're doing anyway, and we've got to remember tourism is an important part of this national parks economy and the regional economy, and it's a really important way, tourism, for people to come and experience the Peak District and get all the benefit that we want them to have and the understanding. So we've got to remember this is a real opportunity, and the growth could very well be a good thing for everyone, but it does need that management, which at every level we're trying to kind of influence and get our points across.
Okay, thank you, members, for those questions and comments. We now move on to agenda item 8, climate change aim overview for 25-26. There will be a short introduction from the author of the report, Emmett Baddeley, who is our Data Strategy and Performance Officer, supported by Emily Fox. Emmett has been in post for just 2 months, so congratulations, I think, on the production of a report already and appearance at authority. So, Emmett, over to you.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you. For the benefit of members who are newer, I've prepared some short slides just to introduce the background to our work on climate change. So the purpose of presenting this report is as an annual report around our climate change aim within the National Park Management Plan, which is for the Peak District National Park to be more resilient and net zero by 2040 through its exemplary response to climate change. And within that, there are 3 objectives, the first of which is to lower greenhouse gas emissions significantly, focusing on the largest emitters within our influence, with the target that there will be a 25% reduction by the end of this management planning period. The second objective is to sequester and store substantially more carbon while contributing towards nature recovery, the target of which is to enable the implementation of nature-based solutions for climate change. And the third objective is to reverse damage to nature, biodiversity, cultural heritage, and in particular built environments caused by climate change, with the target that we'll secure funding for 4 measures to increase the resilience of existing habitats, species, cultural heritage, and the built environment. And in terms of our work on that as an authority, within the authority plan, we have an objective also around climate change, which is to reduce the authority's greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the background to this report being brought to you today, for the purpose to be noted, to note the progress towards these aims and to raise any points for discussion.
Thanks, Emmett. Members, the floor is yours. The assumption is that you've read the report and are bursting with questions, or not. Any questions of Emmett? Ken Rustage.
Yes, could I really welcome that? I think it's a great initiative. I mean, particularly, the one you said about you showed the one with the buses coming in and so on. I wondered, you also, that last picture had a picture of the trains going in. Now, that's linked into something we were doing last week. And we'll maybe mention it later on in the agenda, but the chances of them getting more trains coming in are diminishing. They've just cut the east-west, the plans for that, at the minute. But maybe in the future, we could have maybe more trains and more buses and everything. Because, this is a really serious one. And added to that, obviously, with the peat and so forth, it's linked in. I wondered just if you've any further comments on that, so looking forward, which, it's a commendable plan.
So linked into what Phil was saying before, obviously there's been this peak partnership summit between the mayoral combined authorities with one of the objectives being to address Snake Pass, but also those mayoral combined authorities have a lot of power around transport, and we have an upcoming workshop with some representatives from the mayoral combined authorities as well as other representatives of our constituent authorities, the aim of which is to talk about the visitor economy and transport as a key kind of factor within that, hoping to generate some support for developing public transport networks within the park. Hopefully there's some work going on to progress things around that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emmett. Janet Dugdale.
Thank you ever so much, Emmett, for presenting this report. For those members who aren't aware, these reports used to go to Programmes and Resources Committee on an annual basis for information and discussion, but they're coming to authority now so that all members can understand the key work that the authority is doing and the partners in the National Park are doing around the 4 aims of the management plan. First of all, fantastic progress we're making this year, as ever. We're now sort of heading towards halfway through the management plan. My question is really, when are we going to start the next management planning? And is there anything that will, of the aims and targets we put in place, which would have been back in 2022, are there any that are proving to be more difficult to deliver than we anticipated, or are there any that are more relevant? And this is a bit of a complicated question, I'm sorry, but also, we've included the climate adaptation work in there since. So what are we seeing that's presenting as particular challenges or changes over and above what we were originally planning to do here?
Thanks, Janet. I think we're looking to get rid of the local plan before we start the next management plan, but I'll leave Emily or Emmett to respond.
Yep, I'll take this one. So in terms of looking to the next management plan, although we're not actively working on it as such, the work that's going on at the moment is leading into that. So, for example, where we're looking at climate change and net zero, that is then forming kind of the framework of where we need to go within the next management plan. Equally, where we're looking at visiting and area management, again, that's giving us some direction to where we would like to go into the future. There's obviously then that task of how that maps across to the targets and outcomes framework, if at all, which we know has always been a bit of a challenge up until this point. So although we're not promoting it as the forthcoming management plan, those things are in train, and it's certainly something that we need to look forward to, and how that then dovetails in with the authority plan as well, because they're obviously on the same timescales. So in terms of timing of things, I haven't got exact when we're going to open things up, but there are things that are very much lining us up so that we're in a really good, solid position for the evidence base when it comes to that point. I think taking your other question, which is much more complicated, I think at the general level, I would say that in terms of the changes that we've had with our budget in particular, the welcome in place element is one that we always knew that would be slower to progress as a result of the last organisational change. That said, obviously it's a management plan for partners as well, and I think that's where we're looking to partners to support and help with that. So I think it has been less of a challenge than it could have been. But I think overall, across all of the aims, we are making progress. It's just some's more steady than other areas.
I was talking about climate change. Are there any particular areas where we're struggling to move towards what we were planning to achieve by 2028?
I think overall we are on target across all of them, would be a much more concise answer to that question.
Thanks, Emily, for that concision. Matt Buckler, then Charles Greaves.
Yeah, I think actually that my question is related to that previous one. So when you click on the link on that, when you click on the report, the link on the report, it says it takes progress on the authority's climate own change aim can be viewed here. So you go to that and it says that we're green, and it says 24-25 implement and keep up to date the authority's carbon management plan, report annually. When does that report come so that we can, because there's just a green dot saying that we're on target, and it's not really, how do we know that we're on target?
Is that the November report that's flagged up in this one? Yeah, over to you.
Yep, so that one will be brought to the next authority meeting so that you can see the progress with our own carbon management plan over the last year, and that will have all of the progress in terms of targets that are associated with it.
Okay, thank you. Charles Greaves.
Yeah, could we go back a slide, please, if that's all? I think it's just one slide, might be. And another. Sorry, and one more. It was the bit about the built environment. I missed it. Could you go forward? Sorry.
It's the golden shark,
all right.
isn't it?
Okay. It might be that one. It might be. I think it's just. Yeah, I think it's the chair's head is just in front of the one. It's all right. Sorry about that. Sorry, Ken. It's perfectly fine. So for this one, the bit, just be useful to get some examples perhaps of the built environment, reverse the damage in particular to the built environment. So are we talking flood risk there? Could you give us some examples of specifically about the built environment that
Can I help out there? If you look at the target, it's about increasing resilience, and that's to do with things like increased heavy rainfall, widening gutters, enlarging drains, enlarging downpipes in order to prevent overflows and flooding through walls and what have you. It's that kind of thing is my recollection of where we were aiming to increase resilience, but also surface water, dealing with runoff, ensuring that properties aren't flooded, even in areas where they're not perhaps in a floodplain. Sorry to delve into my past, but it's that kind of thing is my understanding, and the nods from Emily and Emmett suggest I'm on the right track.
That's helpful. I was thinking it would be more along the lines of adaptation rather than reversing. That was the bit. But, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Mike Chaplin.
Just following on from that, wouldn't that also include the remediation work that goes on when a lot of the mineral workings have finished? I can remember a report coming probably a couple of years ago about work that was done to clean up a site. Don't ask me which one. But
I'm not going to.
I would have thought that would have been included in Objective 3.
Okay. Yep. Nods from Emily. Okay. I hope that helps, Charles. Any other questions or comments? Mandy Martin.
It might be an inappropriate question, but I noticed that we had climate change training scheduled for October, which has been cancelled for members. It came through as a cancellation in my diary.
It's not cancelled. It's still going ahead. I'll check.
All right, thank you. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure it was still going ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just you that we were trying to exclude. Yeah. Okay. It's nothing personal, Mandy. Any other comments or questions, members? If not, the recommendations are before you. Could I have someone to move those recommendations? Charles Greaves, and second, Ken Rustage. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. Those as moved. Thanks, Emily. Emmett. Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item 9, building the foundations for corridor connections. It's a report from the Chief Exec. I don't believe there are any additions to be made to the report. Any comments? Well, you said not before. So the report is before you, members. Are there any comments or questions of Phil on this item? Janet, and then Simon.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is an item that would normally have gone to Programmes and Resources again, but because of timing, it's, Resources Committee. I've just got a question. I'm totally supportive of this, but we talk in the proposal about building the foundations and capacity to create and deliver a long-term, large-scale landscape connection programme across the White Peak, transform nature recovery, protect natural. You can read it yourself. Can you give some examples of what that might look like in practice, so I can sort of imagine what we might see when this is delivered?
Yeah, thanks, Janet. And as I've got the floor now, I do want to actually publicly thank the partners, including Rachel, who's in the room, for putting together a really strong bid here. This funding, just for the context, this funding is a new stream. It's the biggest, most longest term funding the lottery have ever done. They're focusing on protected landscapes, and it's you're allowed to put in one bid per protected landscape, and it's by no means a certainty that you'll get the bid. We have got the first stage, okay, which is because it's so long and so much money, they've introduced a new extra stage, which allows us now to have this funding to really work up the detail to then put in the development stage. So there's an extra stage. That's the money we've got. So the detailed answer to your question, I can't give you because that's what we've got this money to work out. But our idea and our intentions would be to focus along the trails in the White Peak in particular, and to enrich nature along or nearby those trails, and to use those trails as corridors to connect different pockets of nature. So it's across the whole White Peak landscape. The trails are the kind of the starting point, but not just limited to the trails. In terms of what enhancements we need, Well, we don't quite know yet because the money will give us, the money will allow us to do the survey, the ecological surveying work and assessments for where interventions will be most beneficial. But you could imagine things like new bits of woodland created that link other bits of woodland. If you think about Ruby Wood that the authority planted to mark the 40th anniversary of the national park, that is a little pocket of woodland off the Tissington Trail, in a habitat that's otherwise fairly green fields, dry stone wall green fields. And so that makes a real difference. So it's kind of replicating enhancements like that, or it could be around in flower-rich meadows, it could be around buffer zones, it could be around species reintroduction, it could be around just creating stepping stones. But the money is also for engagement. So what we will see at the end of it is new audiences coming onto the Trails Network which can handle visitors. So we're not taking new visitors into sensitive ecological areas as such. We're making the ecology greater in the area where visitors already are. So we'll see more or newer types of visitors coming with greater understanding of the habitats and nature, there'll be some programming to connect people and improve their understanding. There'll be some kind of audience development work. And there is a bit of heritage enhancement as well, where we can enhance or repair or restore heritage assets as part of this, then that we might see that happening as well.
Okay. Simon Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. I think Phil's partially answered my question. I'm very supportive of this thing. It's a great opportunity, but in the details on the proposal, it talks about partnerships including communities underserved by the White Peak, which is a slightly odd expression. I just wanted to understand what was meant by that.
Yeah. I mean, some of this language reflects the lottery's language, for example. And this bid itself was commended for really understanding what the lottery's objectives are with this scheme. And they do want new audiences to access nature and protected landscapes. So I guess what we're talking about here is imagine people from Stoke, say, or Derby, particularly that southern gateway, who wouldn't necessarily visit regularly or visit in a way that really connected them with the nature. So it could be going into Sheffield, Manchester, but because it's a White Peak project, we're thinking south, those conurbations. So it's about working with community groups in those communities. Think about what Mosaic, that project's done. It's a similar model, if that helps.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Matt Buckler.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about this in context of the report that the thing that you said earlier on about MCA. I assume that there'll be more interaction with MCA around it because the mayor's point about the fastest growing tourism economy in the country, greenest tourist, it's really supportive of that, isn't it? And getting MCA involved in the next phase would seem to be a really good opportunity.
Yeah, so one of the great things about this funding stream is this initial pot of money we don't have to provide any match funding for. The lottery are being really super supportive, recognising you need money to develop a bid. If we're successful in this phase and we get to the development and then the delivery phases, we're talking about £10 million. And we might need to raise £500,000 to £1 million in match funding alongside that. So that's where I would see partners such as MCA, but also others contributing in kind and money support. So we haven't really kind of considered yet how to involve MCA, but that's what this next bit of money will allow us to do, is to get those kind of governance pieces in place, get those priorities worked out as to who the partners are, do some test and trial, that kind of thing.
Thanks, Phil. Nick Adams.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to the previous item as well, that I see it's on this report about, what number are we? Go back. 5E, net zero. I'm just wondering, you've been out to shows and obviously this work, well not obviously, the work you're doing with the Farming Protectors landscapes, how well received has it been? What sort of uptake are you getting from farmers? How receptive are they to changes in farming practice, to more regenerative farming and the work that you're proposing? Thank you.
That is really good. I'm not the best person to answer that. Janet, you were at the FIPL panel this week, weren't you? And maybe you could just give a little vignette of how the FIPL, the panel that you were at this week, or maybe others are involved in that. I wasn't at that panel, but overall, I would say that we have seen really strong engagement, not only with the FIPL, but also with the Morridge Hill Country project. So that's another funding stream, a big funding stream from government, landscape recovery. We've brought more and more farmers and land managers in that who are interested in nature recovery and farm diversification. So that's progressing well. We do have another White Peak landscape recovery project kind of bubbling away. Now that didn't get initial funding, so we've gone away. We've actually been given money by Natural England and others to do more work on that and build that group of farmers who are interested in landscape recovery. I think that's going very well. I'm not sure when it's going to be ready for another landscape recovery bid, but that's the aim there. So we've got those landscape recovery bids. We've also got the FIPL money, which is focused on 4 different things, including nature recovery. Janet, can you say anything about the FIPL?
Yes, thank you. I'm the member on the FIPL assessment panel, which is Farming and Protected Landscapes funding. And Ginny was doing it before me as well. It's not universal. Not all farmers want to engage in this, and not all farmers don't want to engage in this. What we are seeing are, in the early days, there would have been the first movers, those interested, but those interested in the first movers are influencing others. And I think there is a groundswell towards this. We're seeing collectives of farmers coming together to want to work in this area. As I say, it's not universal, but I think there's some really good practice out there, and I think it is gaining traction, for sure.
Thanks, Janet.
Ginny, do you want to add anything?
The only thing I would add is that our farming engagement team work really closely with these farmers, and they are such a value in the way they promote FIPL to the farming community. But yes, I would endorse what Janet has just said.
Thanks, Ginny. Charlotte Farrell, then Matt Buckler and Ken Rustage.
Thanks. Just going back to this particular agenda item, I think it's really good. The ideas of the project and everything, but I suppose my concern is, well, how secure, how much do we think we're really likely to get it? Because and this isn't obviously anything we can do anything about, but every time we're bidding, we're building up these bids, we're using resources to build up the bids, staff time, etc. So if it doesn't happen, what happens to all that work that we've done? I suppose that's really my question.
Yeah, good, thanks. Well, I think there's a high chance that we will get it because we got such positive feedback. I know there are other national parks that have submitted and been rejected. So the fact that we've been accepted and we got a really good kind of commendation, if you like, on how closely it was aligned, how well we understood the objectives. We've got really strong partners involved. I think we've got something that's absolutely what they're looking for. We're also, an iconic national park and landscape, and I think the lottery would be very interested in supporting a Landscape Connections project here. And it's worth a huge amount of money. It's £10 million worth of funding. So that is really worth putting some effort in. What we actually did with this is we've had a staff role, which is a kind of a grant development officer. We found it really hard over the last 18 months to recruit into that role for a number of reasons. So we've taken some of that money and we've paid a consultant to help us write this bid, which was absolutely worth the money because the bid was so successful. So that's the way we're resourcing it. There's always the risk that bids you go for are not going to come off. I think we've almost got the opposite problem here. Pretty much, every bid we're going for, we're getting. which you think we've got 3 in.
Steady.
It's what we've got 3 in cultural heritage area. We've got the People of the Peaks, we've got the archive project, we've got the research framework. We're working closely with the foundation, who are also, increasingly successful in their bids. We're looking at a North Lees lottery bid, which is not the Landscape Connections pot, it's the normal kind of £5 million pot. That's a really important area in landscape, and I think we'll get a strong bid for that. So I'm really encouraged. I think our problem is when you get lottery money, they don't pay any overheads because we're a local authority. So that means we get the money for the staff, but we don't get the kind of management costs and the accommodation and the laptops and so on. And so that's a cost to us, but it's worth it for these kind of impactful, high-profile projects, I think. There is always a risk you don't get it, but we have to go for it, particularly with a declining government grant. One of the problems with that is that the kind of money we get in through these projects doesn't offset the declining government grant, because that government grant covers those core essential, almost back office functions you need to deliver any project. If the projects are not contributing to that and the grant's going down to cover that, that's kind of a long-term problem that we face.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Matt Buckler.
Yeah, firstly it was a response to the FIPL point as well. So I sit on the FIPL panel on behalf of the NGOs. And at the last FIPL meeting earlier this week, we had a proposal come forward from the Peakland Environmental Farmers Group, which is developed by farming community around the Dark Peak. We've just had a really good infographic about, I can't remember the numbers, about the number of people that are involved, but there are hundreds of projects across the Peak District. I think it's worth, but I also wanted to say about 2 of the things that you said in your response to Charlotte's question. We've got Moors of the Future coming to us today with stuff around the M62. When I worked for the National Park Authority, I was employed to deliver a Heritage Lottery Fund grant in 2004 to deliver which was about the Moors of the Future project, and that's been going ever since. Because through that heritage, through that lottery funding, they did the work around how you can get funding for it, how you can develop, how you can get more money to do this, and so it's a really good Kickstarter, and that only happened because of the work the National Park did to look at that project. And I think the other thing that I think that your point around the overheads, we made at the last meeting, in terms of, is there ways of doing it, which means that it sits somewhere else where they can get the overheads. The National Park still gets the same number of staff but doesn't get the overheads because there are partners who can claim the overheads. So we did projects on behalf of the National Trust where they were the only people who could apply for it. I wrote the application when I worked for the National Park. Thinking around, working in partnership is working out where the strengths are and where the opportunities are. And it may well be that the National Park isn't the right place to sit it because of things like that. But so it just needs some thinking about how that sits and how that works.
And I'm sure that's part of what the recommendation is about, is accepting this $250,000 in order to develop precisely those kinds of partnerships. And there's alternative ways of looking at things. I don't know if you have anything to add. No, thanks for that, Matt. Ken Rustage.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's been much discussion about the White Peak, and you talked about the communities in the White Peak in Point 3. I was wondering, is there any idea to spread this to the Dark Peak? I'm just looking at a map that the Dark Peak is actually a much bigger area geographically than the White Peak. And for members, I'm sure members do know that it's the Dark Peak is there with the grit stones, and the White Peak, very nice, with the limestone. Thank you.
Just a quick response to that is that when we initially started workshopping this new opportunity, everything was on the table. What we honed down on the White Peak is because of the kind of density of the existing trails network there, a lot of which we own, and therefore permissions and ownership's clearer. So it's, you know, it was all considered, and we felt the project that most aligned to what could be delivered and the lot you were interested in was to focus it on the White Peak. We considered focusing it everywhere, and kind of we got early advice that was too broad, you know, bring it down a bit. So that's why we've gone there.
Thanks, Phil. Andy Nash.
Thanks. I welcome this idea. I just think with more tourism coming to the valley or to the park, are we aligning this with the hub, recreation hubs that we're going to discuss in a minute for the local plan?
Yes, I mean, this will fit in to some extent with some of that area management approach. This particular project, you're probably looking at more like areas around Dovedale and Hartington, those kind of areas. But our whole area management approach will be fitting in and overlaid with this project.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Any other comments or questions, members? If not, the recommendations are before you. Can I have a proposer? Ginny Priestley, seconder. Martin Beer, thank you. All those in favour, show of hands. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That item has been accepted. We're about to move on to item 10, which is the substantive item. I recognise we've been going for an hour. Would members wish for a short comfort break? Speak now or forever? Yes, there's a nod and a thumbs up. So can I suggest we're back here by 11:05, please, members? We'll start again then. Right. Thank you, members, for return. Just before we start, something I meant to mention at the outset of our meeting today, there is a new member induction programme that is delivered currently by Northumberland National Park Authority. It's a 2-day event that I remember Mike Chaplin and myself went to one when it was in the New Forest National Park, and it's really useful for new members to get an overview about national park authorities, their roles and responsibilities, over and above the information that we provide as an authority for our own members. This year there is a significant number of new members across the national park family. But the uptake hasn't been as large as it might be. I mean, we have a number of new Secretary of State members, new local authority members. It's not mandatory, but it's certainly recommended. So I think there's only 2 of our members have expressed an interest in going. But the opportunity is there, and I would encourage members to get in touch with whom? With Sarah. The voice is off, as I think is the theatrical term. Get in touch with Sarah. You can collar her today, pin her in the corner, as it were, if you feel that it would be useful. Certainly, we are supportive. This National Park Authority is supportive of sending its members. I know others. Ruth, for example, has been there before. So do consider that. Ken, do you want to say something quickly?
I applied to try to get it on last year, but it got cancelled. So I really would like to go on it this year, but I'm just so heavily pressed with my council duties, working in GM and Peak District obviously this, and I mean, maybe could revisit it. We just can't even get substitutes. We're so heavily pressed. So I'm going to have a word with Sarah and see if I can, because I really would like to go, but it's just the timing.
Yeah, one of the things that came out of the meeting in the New Forest at the beginning of the week was that because there's so many new members, the current programme is likely to be oversubscribed. So they're looking to do a second one. Don't know when yet. But the more people we have to be able to say, yes, we think you need to put on a second one, then the stronger the leverage. Thanks. Ken Richardson.
What dates were you? You mentioned dates.
Because I didn't know I can't remember what they are.
It's November.
November time. So I think if there was an email went round, if we can ask Sarah to resend that email. It'll be a third time, but hey, you know, it might get through eventually.
25th to the 27th of November.
Right. Yeah. They'll turn the heating on, not up.
Is it at the sill?
Yes.
It's very warm there. We've got fantastic underfloor heating.
Right. So what more recommendation do you need? Okay, members, that was an aside, I think, but an important one. Let's move on to the substantive item then, the local plan review preferred approach. Adele Metcalf, our Policy and Communities team leader, is here. Some members benefited, I hope, from the 3-hour briefing we had last week. Unfortunately, not all members were able to attend, but nevertheless, Adele, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. This item isn't an easy read, and I very much appreciated that many of you were able to attend the training session last week. I hope that and the presentation that I circulated has been useful. You've been asked to approve the local plan preferred approach for statutory consultation and to delegate finalisation of supporting documents to the Head of Planning and the Local Plan Steering Group for consultation alongside the main document. The preferred approach is a significant milestone. It is essentially an early version of the draft local plan. It sets out either the proposed policy or what we're calling a policy direction. This shows the intent of policy without the precise wording. The preferred approach has been researched, developed and written by the Policy and Communities team with oversight from the Head of Planning and the Local Plan Review Member Steering Group in accordance with authority procedures. Committee will recall that 12 months ago, we undertook the first statutory consultation on issues and options. The responses to that informed this preferred approach, and a summary of responses is available as a background paper and will be published on the local plan website. The preferred approach is also informed by evidence that we've commissioned on the rural economy, viability, population and housing need and design. All this is also published on the local plan webpage, except for the rural economy report, which is in a near final draft stage, but that will be available for the consultation period. There are 2 outstanding commissions, a strategic flood risk assessment and one on settlement landscape sensitivity and capacity. Both of these will inform the next stage. I didn't include in the report the proposed dates of consultation because it's still subject to change, but our hope and expectation is that it will start on Monday the 3rd of November for 7 weeks. As with issues and options, there will be a lot of publicity, including direct mail to parish councils and other consultees. There will be online and hard copies to view, and people can respond in lots of different ways, including by email. It's important to note that at this stage of the plan-making process, we can still make changes to draft policies in response to the comments that we receive. We now have just over a year to write a final plan and submit this to the Secretary of State by the December 2026 deadline. The deadline is set by government for plans submitted within current regulations. The Chief Planner at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government said in August this year, and I quote, "Local planning authorities will not be able to carry out an early statutory consultation under the existing system and a pre-submission statutory consultation under the new system." What this means in non-planning speak is that if we miss the December 2026 deadline, as far as consultation processes are concerned, we would have to start again. So, as soon as the preferred approach is out to consultation, we will start in earnest on producing the final draft plan, taking into account the comments that we receive and the outstanding commissions. We'll have this ready for your approval and final consultation in late spring, early summer next year. Comments received at this stage are submitted to the Secretary of State with the plan. A last important point to note, issues raised at the members' training last week and any issues raised today will be discussed by the Head of Planning and the Member Steering Group. If appropriate, the issues can be addressed initially by a minor modification to the consultation document, but considered fully during the consultation phase. Finally, I'd like to thank colleagues across the authority who've given the help and advice along the way. Particular thanks to my team and to the Local Plan Steering Group, as always. Thank you for your attention and consideration of the report. And I think it might be nice if the Local Plan Steering Group would just kind of raise their hands and showed yourselves to the rest of the authority so you know the people who've been helping with the production of this document. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Adele. That's identified the victim straight away. Okay, members, before I open it to the floor, just again to perhaps reinforce what Adele has been saying, that this document has been through due process, the authority's due processes. What we're being asked to do is to agree a consultation document, and what I would ask members to do is to keep that in mind, that what we're not looking for at this stage is your response to the consultation document. It's the content and the appropriateness of what's going forward that has been through all those processes and has come out of that mixer in its current form. It isn't finished, as Adele has said. It contains draft policies and directions of travel that we're seeking comment on from members of the public, communities, organisations, and yourselves, if you want to engage, and I'm more than happy to see members engaging in the consultation process. But at this stage, this is the document that we're being asked to approve as per the recommendations to go out against that timetable that we are seeking to achieve of conclusion by this end of December 26. On that basis, Rachel Bennett and then Ken Richardson.
Thanks. Adele, thank you for that. The report's really clear, and yeah, thanks for your presentation. That's made it really understandable. I've noted what you've just said, Ken, so sorry for this question. But when the consultation happens, how are members going to be consulted? As per the public or in a different forum?
I assume that the process, you know, the normal consultation processes will be online, by email, by letter, perhaps even grabbing Adele's ear, figuratively speaking. Adele, do you want to?
Yeah,
microphone.
You're welcome to comment as a consultee, as is everybody. So we're not proposing to do anything, or we weren't proposing to do things specific for members to help you make your consultation response. But if you want that, we could do that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Adele. Ken Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Due to the fact that the majority of us unpicked this document only last week, I would like to move the recommendations as printed.
Thank you, Ken. Simon Thompson.
Yeah, I'm just linking this back to the climate change discussion that we had earlier. This is a plan that's going to run through till 2045. We've signed up to the Race to Net Zero, which is committing us to have a landscape which is net zero by 2040. And focusing on the things within this local plan where we can have a direct impact on that housing policy in particular. I just think that in relation to Policy 11, which is listed buildings, and Policy 12, conservation areas, we should say something about having a generally permissive approach towards developments that are designed to decarbonise domestic heating.
Mm-hmm. Adele, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yes, I think it would be useful if you made that response as part of the formal consultation response. We have a draft statement about design principles. That's very loose and vague at the moment, but we work that up into a full policy as well, so that might be an area that we would look at that also. But yeah, I take your point, and yeah, I would recommend to make it during the consultation process.
Sorry, may I just, a question for you, Ken. I'm slightly confused because this document is going out as being recommended by the authority, isn't it?
Mm. Yep.
And yet I'm now being told that I can't have an impact on the document. I just have to consult in the same way as a member of the public.
Yes, I think it's one of the inevitable difficulties of putting out a major document is that the group has been the working group has been meeting as I said earlier almost weekly and trying to address as many issues as possible. It's not always possible to cover everything, as Adele has said. This is a document that is, if you like, the apex of a triangle of a whole suite of data, and there are background documents that feed into it. It wouldn't be appropriate to overload this document with all that background. That's why there's so many hot links in it. One of the things that the government's requirement for producing this document is that we have to review what have been our SDPs, the SPDs, strategic planning documents, one of which, as Adele has just said, was a design guide, elements of which date back, I think, to 2009. So it's overdue for review anyway, but it needs to be done in the context of this document. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that every detail goes into this document, but it needs to be in the background, it needs to be in the work that informs and is informed by the approved local plan as it comes through. Although it's a document for 40 years, 20, it goes through to 45, a 20-year document, it doesn't mean it's fixed in tablets of stone. There will be revisions, reviews and reiterations as it goes through its life. So I think we are looking for a document that goes out that is broadly indicative of the direction of travel that the authority is wanting to make. That's why they're draft policies and why there are directions in there. So I think it's appropriate that we are asking people to consider what we've said. It cannot cover everything because it's a draft document anyway, and therefore we need those insights, those elements that other people will pick up on, as you have on this particular element, and that needs to inform the final document. I understand your dilemma, but I think it's one that we've got to acknowledge. We cannot solve, I don't think, at this stage. The local plan working group has been in existence for 2 years, and there's a document that is incomplete, frankly. It's a draft document. That's the product of 2 years of work. And we aren't going to be able to cover everything, is my point, I suppose.
But if I may, just to summarise, you're saying you're not inviting comments from the authority on this document. Any comments that they might have would have to go through the normal consultation process. All you're seeking is our endorsement that this document goes out as is.
Yes, unless there is a really major issue that members raise, which could be, why on earth are you revising the housing element? If the general opinion of members was the housing need section was complete cobblers, then we would have to go back to think, what on earth can we do about that? I hope no members are going to say that, but it's that kind of level rather than, if you'll forgive me, some of the minutiae that might otherwise come through, which is important. I'm not decrying it at all, but I think there's there has to be a reliance on the consultation process to raise issues about the relevance of the draft policies and the directions, the policy directions in the document. You have anything to add to that, Adele?
No, thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Patrick Brady.
My contribution follows neatly from that, actually. I think Simon's point is one, by the way, which most members of the planning committee will have some sympathy with, and I'm sure we could look at it when we look at the detailed wording and see whether something to acknowledge that point can be fitted in somewhere. Chairman, you're quite right. What we should be looking at mostly at the moment is direction of travel. It's not I don't think it's enough to say, well, look, this is only a consultation document, and therefore we can amend it at a later date. We have to believe that what we're putting forward now is something that is going to end up in the document when the time comes. And if it's fairly fundamental to the issue, then we need to address it. First of all, Chairman, I'd like to add to what's been said earlier on about the team that we've been working with over the last year or two. I cannot commend highly enough Adele and her team's patience at the way in which we've offered various contributions, sometimes almost illegibly, to try and improve and add to this document. It would be wrong, I think, however, to say that this is the report of the working party, because, I mean, some bits of it we've actually never actually seen as a whole before. We have contributed. Officers have taken notes. They've been very patient. I'm very grateful to them for the work that's been done. But there are, I think, issues still that may need to be addressed. I do have two serious concerns about the direction of travel, as you put it, in relation to two issues in this draft plan as it is at the moment. The first of them is about the settlement strategy, as it's called. And for those members who are following these things, you will find it on page 79 of the papers, page 39 of the actual document itself. And in essence, what this proposes is that whereas at the moment we have a long list of villages where development can take place, in future that will be split between larger villages and smaller villages. And the only difference in policy terms between a larger village and a smaller village is that in the case of a larger village, housing schemes of more than 10 units can come forward, and in smaller villages, housing schemes of less than 10 houses can come forward. Now, actually, that can happen under present policy. And the thing that is confusing me, and I really do not understand, and I have wrapped my mind around it time and time again, is why it is necessary to split the settlements in that sort of way. And the only conclusion that I've been able to reach is because the intention is that larger villages will take more development than they actually need for their own purposes. And the consequence of that is that smaller villages will not take that sort of development. And bear in mind that the major form of new housing is social housing, for which the resources available are limited. If you provide more houses in larger villages, then the opportunity for smaller villages to have affordable houses will be more limited. And I find that a very difficult concept. And when you look at the report, it says, for example, that the justification for this is that the larger villages have the greatest housing need. I've not seen any evidence whatsoever that that is the case. And actually, the fact that they have the greatest housing need is not the justification for this policy. We have been told that, in fact, we don't even know whether some of these larger villages have the capacity to accommodate significant more housing. So I have a problem with that. But the reason for the policy is set out on page 83, which is that the sustainability appraisal says that a tiered approach to housing will have a positive effect on Objective 10 housing. What that is telling us is that the bigger the site that you build for housing, the easier it is to develop it and the cheaper it is to develop it, which is fine. But that's not our objective. Our objective is something else, and our objective, and it's quite interesting, I don't know whether it's a Freudian slip or an intentional thing, but when you look at the the characters of the larger villages, those are described in this report on page 39 as sustainable settlements. When you look at the description of smaller villages, there's no reference to them being sustainable. I'm not sure what the significance of that is. But we have to remember, and it's here at the beginning of this document, because it's enshrined in this document, that our objective for housing is in the context of our agreed definition of thriving and sustainable communities. And for members who don't understand what that is because they weren't around when that was being developed, it was about the ability of communities to sustain the things that are important to them. Whether it's the family connections, their church, their school, their post office, their shop, or whatever else it might be. That is the objective. And the way this reads to me at the moment is that that is an objective which will only be met in one group of the villages and not in another. And either we've got the drafting of this wrong or we've got the principle wrong. But we need to have in this document a clear statement as to how these policies, as they're set down here, will actually meet the objective that we've set ourselves of thriving and sustainable villages. And I don't think at the moment we're doing that. Very quickly, Chairman, can I just move on to another policy area, which actually as a group I'm afraid we didn't have time to discuss, at least not properly, and that is the way in which tourism hubs are being addressed. And if I can find that, biodiversity, Tourism.
Perhaps, Patrick, if whilst you're looking for that, if we give Adele a chance to respond to the issues over the
Okay.
settlement strategy, because my understanding of the definition of sustainable settlement as used in the document was the existing facilities. Is that correct?
Don't know what
Yes,
that
so
means.
with regard to the point about housing need, we're not moving away from the approach that we would look at housing need on a parish-by-parish basis. But for a spatial strategy, you have to have an overall approach, and this is the overall approach that we're talking about. And so the assumption that was made, and it is an assumption, is that villages with larger populations would, other things being equal, have more housing need, because that's broadly how it works. So that was one assumption that was made. And when we talk about sustainable settlements, we're talking about sustainable locations, really, rather than, I think, what Councillor Brady means, which is about the ability of kind of a population to be sustained in a settlement. So thinking about things like whether there are shops and services there, or access to good transport, or schools and things like that. So when we talked about, for the justification for this particular policy direction, when we talked about sustainable settlements, that's what we meant. And if that's not clear, we can make that clear in the report. So there's two things. The population is broadly related to, the housing is broadly related to population. And when we talk about sustainable settlements, that's broadly related to things like schools, shops, services, those kind of things. The justification for the approach is, as I mentioned at the training session last week, we've not put it in the consultation document itself. There's just kind of some headline bullets in there. But there will be a topic paper that's published alongside, and all the evidence of how we've kind of reached these decisions, the justification for it, is gone into in much more detail in the topic paper. So if like Patrick, you read this and were worried about the issues that he's raised, you could then go and look at the topic paper and either be satisfied by what we've said in there, or you think, well, I still would like to challenge that. But there is more detail to explain the thinking behind it in the topic paper. So you don't have to just rely on the kind of the bullets that we've made in the consultation document.
Yep, Brian.
Thanks, yeah. I think another reason that I've observed and been part of while we've gone through this process is the conversation we'll be having with local councils or local housing authorities as well. And we've observed a slowdown in delivery, and that's something that these policies are trying to resolve as far as we can. And when we've talked to bodies like Derbyshire Dales, it's been really important to try and align what we do as a spatial planning authority with their role as the housing authority, and to be as kind of directive and clear as possible as to the kind of places where delivery is more possible. And as well at scale, because as we've said, actually the housing delivery bodies are looking for viable schemes. Funding is difficult, delivery is difficult. So the responses we got back at the last stage, I think, was universally in favour of this approach by the local councils, because they were saying this really helps us. From a council perspective, it's saying, actually, we can now align our housing strategies with where you're talking about, and we can work together much more positively on that. So while it's quite high level, it seems to actually create more positive spatial planning.
Thank you, Brian. I'll go back to Patrick for the second point that you wish to raise on tourism hubs.
Yes, Chairman, I'm on page 106, which is recreation hubs. What we're being asked to do here is to accept the possibility of development in different sorts of recreation hubs. The recreation hubs are listed as some fairly big, obvious locations. Then there's another list underneath of smaller locations. And they're all being described as hubs. And we're being told that development will be acceptable in all of these places. Now, Phil's just made the point earlier on, for example, that we're trying to keep tourists away from the more sensitive nature sites and so on. What we have here is a list of places where people now go, where we are saying it's acceptable in principle to provide more development. And in the process of providing more development, we are not giving the slightest consideration to some of the adverse impacts that may arise. Now, just to take a very simple example, if you say that you could have some more development, for example, at Langsett Barn, that might make some sort of sense. If you're going to take the Irwood car park, that is in a very wild area with very narrow lanes to get to it. It is an area almost devoid of development away from the dams. And what you're saying is we're prepared to have new development down there, and we're prepared to put up with the additional traffic, noise, all the rest of it that goes. As soon as you start providing facilities on some of these sites, you are going to have an adverse effect on the area, and it's going to attract visitors and all sorts. What we ought to be doing is looking at how we can to spread out and diversify these sites rather than concentrate on them. And what we're in danger of doing here is just adding to problems that we already have. And one of the most important issues that we need to take into account is not just nature recovery and the impact on nature recovery, but the impact on the landscape and the condition of the landscape, the wear and tear in the landscape, and so on and so forth. And I don't believe we have enough information available to say that that list is the list that we should start doing things to. And if we are serious about the way we should approach this, there should be a simple general policy which simply says, away from settlements, if you're going to do any visitor management, these are the criteria that we will apply before you can do it. But to actually earmark some of these places as areas of potential development, even though there are one or two things listed out as criteria, it is, I think, very dangerous, because once you've listed it, you can't unlist it. If you say you can, for example, that Irwood car park is a perfectly acceptable situation, you can't then back off it and say, oh, but it isn't because the roads are too narrow. It's too late. This list should not exist in this form.
I take your point, Patrick, and I'm sure that the provision of a list can be reviewed. But I would say that it says modest development, albeit modest isn't defined. And at the top of the next page, it does say in that block, in all cases, applications must be informed by the landscape strategy. And then there's a suite of bullet points about impact have to be assessed with regard to impact on valued landscape character, impact on residents, local and environmental location, environmental capacity, existing provision, ability to deliver. That, as far as I'm concerned, all the caveats are there. I take your point about a list, and once it's there, it becomes an accepted thing. Adele, do you wish to add to anything?
Just to point out that the evidence that sits behind this, again, will be presented in a topic paper that accompanies the consultation when it goes out, but also that it's based on a long-standing piece of work that the Policy and Communities team have been looking at this even before the local plan review started. So it's based on research both in the field and doing visitor surveys and things like that. So there is a lot of work behind that. We've not just kind of plucked these sites out of the air.
But I think there's merit in Patrick's comment about a general caveat, if you like, about development, whether or not that list is perpetuated. Brian?
Yeah, thank you. I think you've explained most of what was that there is sort of two categories in there. One is the ones you would expect to see, the existing big sites. Then there are other places that serve a really important role in the landscape, and places like Irwood and other places have been put in there historically, to manage part of those issues. I think there is a difference between the two. The second group would be about more modest enhancements, e.g. to enhance parking provision or information in those places. Other top-tier sites could be where we actually improve the visitor facilities. So I think there's a point about being really clear about the language and intent in both of those. The next point I was going to make is similar to the last point, really. It's about when you've got those places, you can actually work with the partner organisations and say, let's really promote these parts as better than parking in the open landscape. These are the places to start your experience from in a less harmful way, and we can manage the experience and facilities from there. We've got lots of problem areas. Wouldn't it be better to promote and direct people to better sites? So that's I think some of the intent, and if that isn't clear, I think there's always scope to do that.
Yeah, I think that's something for Tuesday's review meeting. Thank you, Patrick, for that contribution. We've got Mike Chaplin. Ginny?
Thank you, Chair. The work here overall is very comprehensive, and I was one of many people.
Your mic's off.
Still not on.
That's it. Yep.
You've got me now. Good. Who did not volunteer to go on the working party, knowing the enormous amount of work that you would have to do. And like Ken, we have responsibilities elsewhere to also attend to. I think what would have helped is a process map so that we know after it's gone to consultation, does it come back to us to review, or does it then go on to the inspectorate, or does it that they're then satisfied that you've got a framework to then flesh out the detail? That sort of route map would, alongside this, I think, would be helpful to members so that we know what different hoops we're going to have to jump through. And it might also give us an idea of time scale. And I say that as someone who's on a council where we had a route map and we got all the way to 2023, and the inspectors didn't like our brownfield first plan for approach to development and said, no, this is a good year or so later. And they came back and said, no, you've got to go and find some greenbelt sites to vary your offer on development for both housing and for economic development, which is why we're having interesting times in Sheffield. You won't have that difficulty, I don't think. But clearly there are other things that you have to be mindful of in relation to the landscape that we're here to look after.
Thank you, Mike. Ken Rustage.
Thank you. Going back just a couple of points. First off, in terms of the housing demand, which obviously we can't really say that for these villages and the decisions taken there. But what I'm thinking is, likely we can't just look within the park. I'm thinking back in time when there was a great need, like I drove to Chapel on Liffriff today, then Manchester, Ulversville, and then over Sheffield, they had Topley just on the adjacent to the park. So there's more demand, the pressure of demand for housing. I mean, that goes back to the slum clearance programmes, people packed in terrible conditions. So there might be a little bit, and obviously the Peak District can help in there. And in terms of the hubs, I was just looking at that. I mentioned two places, Monsell Head. I drove down this morning as I came over the top. The glint of the car, I was shocked. I said, what's that? The massive number of cars. And then, as I actually stopped and just nipped in the loo there, and the amount of people there this morning, lots of kids and young people really enjoying that, the Monsell Trail and everything, we talked about that. So it's a good thing. Also Dovestones, that's in my area, that's, picking these areas where you've got to get people. I think what Patrick alluded to, and he makes a very good point, we've got to think of the future. We've got a lot more people coming here, and are these car parks where they're going to park, and mention like the Snake Pass and people parking badly and the state of the whole thing. It's to think outside the box what we can do. That maybe links into public transport and maybe even the trains. I mean, the chances of the trains coming down here now, I think that's really that thing that has left the station, because they've even just cut the East Coast main line. There's a right to do going on about that. So that's probably not going to be in our lifetime, but we've got to think what we can influence. So just I thought I'd just make a number of points. Hopefully that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Ginny Priestley. Kath, then Kath.
First of all, I share Patrick's concerns on the... First of all, I share Patrick's concerns on the housing piece. But on the recreation hubs, it's concerning that we're actually identifying areas where we will accept development. And I'm looking at two areas that I'm close to, where we really should be encouraging visitors to go to other places, because these places are full up. And I'm thinking about the Derwent Valley, where Fair Homes has been identified, and then the Mamnick. These areas are absolutely packed with people. So saying that we will accept modest development, or identifying recreation hubs where we're going to be more receptive to developments, I don't think it's helpful to put a list in there. And I would personally take the list, both lists out, and just leave it so that it is taken as a... Once you identify somewhere, you're giving people the opportunity to say you put this in your local plan that you would accept development here. It's not helpful for the future. It's not helpful for the next 5 years, let alone the next 10, 20 years.
Yes, and in some respect, well, thank you, Ginny. I mean, in some respect, it's ironic that, what we're talking about, modest development, as Brian has said, might include review of the parking provision. That's exactly what's happening at National Trust Mamnick Car Park in order to try to accommodate some of the parking about which the local community is quite rightly up in arms. So we're almost acknowledging a fait accompli by including it. I take the point about lists, and I'm sure that will be something that we will touch on in our Tuesday review. Kath Potter.
A little history lesson. I came to be on this national park because I came from a non-settlement village, and yet we used to have huge articulated lorries coming through this single track lane with often blocks that were neither chopped or chained, and I used to sit in front of these lorries and went on television and exposed what was happening. And there'd been no houses there, I don't think. Well, there's only about 25 anyway. And I was, in 2009, I was in South Island, New Zealand, and Keith said, let's go and look at that gold mine. And as we drew into it, the car park was enormous, and it was lined with Endcliffe stone, where I live. I couldn't believe my eyes. And yet we're not suitable for building in the hamlet. I leave that dichotomy with you.
Quarrying and housing. Indeed. Thank you, Kath. Charlotte Farrell.
Two things. Firstly, I understood that the housing settlement strategy was because, for one thing, we're trying to reach net zero. We don't want people driving around unnecessarily. If we've got facilities in a village, that it makes sense to build there rather than make people, especially with young children, we want thriving and sustainable communities, have to drive to the nearest school, to the nearest shop, to the nearest doctors. So that's what I understood by that. In terms of the recreation hubs too, it's really interesting listening to everybody assuming that just means cars. I mean, what's wrong with having better places for cycling, encouraging buses to go to those places? That's what we need to make it more sustainable. We're so car fixated, it's sad.
Thanks, Charlotte. for reminding us. Martin Beer, then Mandy. Martin.
Right. I have no problems with the first list, which is actually defining what's already there. The second list I find problematic, partly because there are large-scale places, for instance, Kerber Gap, which aren't even on the list. I think we can delete the list and just have the conditions, which are actually quite sensible, and that would be more flexible and easier for planning committee to actually be able to deal with. Whereas if you've got a list, people are going to say, "We're on. You've got. We're on this list. We can do this," and that may be totally inappropriate.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Brian.
I think it's a really good point actually, and I know it was raised at the member group. You know, how many should we, those kind of things, and we've kind of pinned down where we thought on balance that was. I think that's a good area to come back to next week, and I think there is some merit in possibly picking up Martin's point there, that as much certainty as possible to those really well established managed sites, but actually then you get into the realms of how else can we direct people, and there is a role for transport in that. I find it difficult because where else would you want to push people to without good provision? You end up harming other places potentially by moving people down the road. So I think you've got to have well-managed sites, but I think that's got to go hand in hand with sustainability principles. So I think there is a good follow-up discussion to have there.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Mandy Martin.
Thank you. I wanted to look at the structure of how the consultation will happen, because I imagine we want to get quite a broad range and diverse range of views. And one of my first observations is this document is comprehensive, quite dense. How are we going to make it easy for people? Have we thought about putting structured questions in there to help shape the consultation responses?
Adele. Your mic's not on. Yep.
So this is one of 3 statutory consultations that we do. And before the start of this process, we did several non-statutory consultations. Because of the stage that we're at, we're not at the stage where we're asking broad questions on issues and principles. That was what we've done before. So really it is getting to grips with the policies and the policy directions. So when the consultation document goes out, it will be the same question, and we want your opinion on that policy or policy direction. So it's the same question repeated all the way. So that's why I've not put the question in there. Previously, we've, it was on broad issues, and that all that big scoping work's been done. The focus as we go through the statutory procedure gets really, really quite narrow and quite difficult. There's no getting away from the fact that it is difficult, but that's the nature of the process. Having said that, what we'll be doing this time, which is what we did last time, is we try and make it accessible to people. So we'll be making print versions, and we'll be sending print copies to all parish councils and our statutory consultees, and that will go on deposit locations. The PDF will be on our website, and we also have a consultation platform so that people who like doing things that way, you can look at it on your phone and you can just do responses just based on, just a few clicks of your iPad or whatever it is you do. So we try our best to get the biggest range of possible responses back. We're also doing some drop-in events. We did lots of drop-in events. Last time we went out and about all over the park. To be fair, not many people came. In terms of the time and effort it takes to put on those responses. So we're going to do those here at Alden House this time, because as I tried to stress, we are very time limited on this process if we're going to get it submitted. So we do our best to get people engaged and responding. But it's not easy to respond to complicated policies. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think with the best will in the world, the development and the draft local plan is of limited interest to a lot of people. That doesn't mean to say we should be complacent or that we should make things difficult. I think one of the constant refrains in the working groups that we've been through is this was the result of the consultation process. This was where the majority of people felt was appropriate. Constantly those figures were being used to underpin or justify the development of these policies. So there were hundreds of people, organisations, groups, local authorities, a good many local authorities and parish councils responded. So whilst I think the actuality is of limited interest, is of interest to a limited number of people and organisations. I think all those who have an interest have the ability and took the opportunity to respond to the previous consultations, and I would hope that the same would happen this time round. Because this is the next iteration. We've gone through the what do you reckon, this is what has been produced as a result of what you reckoned, as well as what we reckoned. I don't think from memory that there are any policies in here that have been developed against a minority interest and minority response in the last consultation process. It's all been, the numbers might not have been large, but it's all been developed as a result of the majority opinions. Okay, members. Nick Adams.
Thank you, Chair. I guess more of an observation than anything. It's really an impossible task to try and achieve what we're doing here. So we've got already issues that are constantly raised, whether it's littering, how did I describe it? Irregular toilet use that farmers are reporting to me, traffic, even antisocial behaviour, and all those issues. So you try and make provision for that, and we want to increase the volume of visitors. You break provision, you're going to get more people. So how you square that, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And it's like trying to make the tourism green without railways, which doesn't look like there's going to be likely. How do you get people to visit without cars? What's the prospect of maybe park and ride or something like that? But then the uptake of those is limited. So, yeah, as I say, it's almost an impossible task, but obviously we've got to try.
Yeah, I think there's some very difficult circles to square, frankly. Though I think from our perspective, we aren't in the business necessarily of encouraging people to visit the national park. What we're trying to do is to make sure that their experience is as good as possible and meets the different demands that different communities have of the national park.
And protects the people.
Indeed, that's one of the communities, several of the communities. Yeah. Rachel.
I think we should always remember why national parks were set up. They were set up for people to come and enjoy.
Indeed.
To get away from the dark satanic mills. Yeah. So let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And beyond those dark satanic mills, we are a national park. Our audience is national. It's across the UK, across Europe, across the world, from our visitors. Okay, right. Janet, then Martin. And we look to conclude.
Yeah, thank you. There's been a fairly long and robust debate about this local plan, and I think it's not a perfect document. It's an impossible task. We've heard all these things. People have got particular views about particular elements of it. I think we as members, our job is governance and making sure that the process by which this has been produced is a robust process. There's been a lot of consultation, there's been a lot of views taken on board. We've just heard from Adele about the next stages of consultation where statutory bodies and parish councils and individuals will have more input into it as well. And, on that basis, I'm satisfied that the process that we've gone through is a robust one. It doesn't mean that I look at every element and think, well, I'm personally happy with that, but that's not my role as a member here today to say that I'm personally happy with things. My role is to say, from a governance point of view, I'm satisfied that we've followed the process. So on that basis, if you put up the right recommendations, not the ones from item 9, I'd be happy to move the recommendations.
Well, they've already been moved by Ken Richardson.
well, I'll
so
second
you've
them
seconded.
then.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Before we go to a vote, Martin, the final comment. Martin Beer.
It's a summary, actually.
The summary.
What we need to remember is that what this is a document which gives the set of policies which have to be applied by planning officers and the planning committee, and will also be tested at appeal, and therefore have to be absolutely clear, and have to be have to fit with national planning guidelines, so that they can be enforced, and so some of the things which we might want to put in them are not appropriate because they're not enforceable.
Yep, thank you, Martin. And of course, before that, it's got to go through examination in public, planning inspector, and be accepted by government, let alone whatever we might think. So,
before you take the vote, can I just ask whether the recommendations include the topic papers being looked at and approved by the local plan working group?
I don't know the answer to that.
It wasn't my intention, but we can add that as a further recommendation. And
Well, to give the group the opportunity of seeing the ones that they want to see, at least.
Okay, so how would the recommendation be amended in that case? No. That the topic papers be reviewed by the local plan working group. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Patrick. I was going to make a comment. Yes, what I was going to say was thank you, members, for your contributions. They have been they will be taken on board, as has been commented on by Brian and Adele. They will be subject to review at Tuesday's review meeting by the steering group. Whether that means there will be significant change, whether that means there'll be change, I can't guarantee. It depends on the outcome of that working group meeting. But thank you nevertheless for the contributions. So, Ken and Janet, you have moved and seconded the recommendations. Are you comfortable with a third recommendation that says that the topic papers will be reviewed by the local plan working group?
Well, I'm comfortable because that's an internal working process. I would have expected that in any case.
Right.
But we are going to approve the document for consultation, that's all.
Yep.
It's still got to go through a sausage machine.
Indeed. Indeed. And whether it comes out as another sausage is a moot point. So on that basis, Janet, you're comfortable?
Yes, I'm comfortable they're reviewed.
Okay.
But it's subsumed in recommendation 1 because it's part of the local plan preferred approach
so on
consultation documents.
On that basis, members, can I? The motion has been, the recommendations have been moved and seconded. All those in favour of adoption? Any against? Any abstentions? 2, 3 abstentions.
Can I have my name recorded as a suggestion?
Yes, and Kath, certainly. So we concluded agenda item 10 in that case. Thank you, members. Pause for breath, and we can move on to agenda item 11, the Boardroom Apprentice Programme for 2026. Lisa Walker, you're going to lead on this? So, Lisa Walker, our Business Centre Manager, is here to answer any questions. You've nothing to add to the report, have you, Lisa?
Just to say that by way of an update, there is not an update, as in we haven't yet been matched with a boardroom apprentice, and we don't exactly know if the programme is going to be run by DEFRA. We're still waiting. We put the application in. The deadline for that was the 12th of September. That application's been acknowledged, and so we're still waiting. But obviously this is before you now to get approval, so that if it is approved, we're good to go and we've got everything sorted out for that.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. It's a bit of a post hoc paper because the application expression of interest had to be submitted, but that's having to respond to someone else's timetable. I think before we get into members' comments or questions, it'd be useful. Mandy Martin, one of our Secretary of State appointees for this year, and it's not axiomatic that this happens, but Mandy was our boardroom apprentice. And I think it might be quite useful to get a perspective from Mandy on the benefits both to her as an apprentice, but also her perspective on the benefits that accrue to the authority.
Happy to. So first of all, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank everyone because of the support and the welcome I received as part of this boardroom apprentice scheme. It actually gave me the confidence to go forward and apply for a Secretary of State position. That was unexpected to have that opportunity time frame happen in the way that it did. I think the other thank you I wanted to give was to Janet. Having a board buddy has been a really useful part of the programme to be able to test thinking, test understanding, question some of the things. Part of the programme you get to go through training. We get 7 days of comprehensive training on how a board should run and what to look for. And it was good to be able to go, well, I've just learnt this in the classroom, but I've not seen it in the boardroom. Why is that? And dig underneath all of that. The main intention of the programme is to bring diversity to the boards. And that diversity is intended to reflect the local communities and that each board serves. And I think that this programme has done that. Hopefully some of the views and questions I've asked has helped with that diverse thinking and that diverse observation. One of the things I would say is DEFRA were a very big part of the programme, a very keen advocate, and from the conversations I had with DEFRA through the programme, my understanding is they are very keen on each national park having a boardroom apprentice moving forward. So I think it's something that DEFRA in particular do look at quite favourably. And we're very much an active part of the programme.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. I just hope that tuition on how a board should work has some remote connection to how it actually works, but we'll perhaps not delve too deeply into that. So, members, Patrick, you had a comment to make.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. I've no problems with this at all, in principle. There's a couple of questions and an issue about the planning committee. I'll deal with the last one first. It is already a case that any member of this authority can ask to speak at a planning committee, and with the chairman's consent they can do it, and it's not part of the public consultation system that they can do it, and they may or may not have been through the planning training. So I'm not sure why in this particular case we would say that the apprentice, or the whatever you call them, buddy or whatever it is, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to attend planning committee, and if the chairman agrees, be allowed to make a comment. But more particularly, even as an observer, I think if this is going to be a rounded approach, they should be allowed to attend the planning committee at least 2 or 3 times during the year, and they should be allowed the allowance for the travelling in order to do it, because that would make it thing much more rounded. My other questions are these. Who actually makes the appointment, and who sets down the criteria for the appointment?
Yeah, by all means.
As part of the application...
Oh, it's me, sorry.
Janet, you might...
Yeah,
no, it's okay.
As part of the application process, you're given a list of all the different bodies who are looking to have an apprentice, and you have to put down your first 3 preferences with rationale as to why that particular board and what it is that you can bring to it. There are then a panel at the Boardroom Apprentice scheme who run the scheme, try to match the individuals who have shown an interest and a motivation for that particular board with what the board is looking for. So that matching happens independently of this group of people here.
So effectively,
about that. We have no choice in the selection. That's made by somebody outside the authority.
Yes, because the whole intention of this selection is to bring diversity to the boardroom, and having that independence of the matching is one of the ways in which they try and make that happen.
So we have no...
I'm happy to move this, but I would like some amendments to be made surrounding the planning committee and their ability, A, to attend, B, to speak, chairman's permission and so on.
Sure. I think in response to your comments on that, my understanding was that it's a pragmatic approach to the costs. Planning usually meets every month. Resources Committee meets every quarter or so. It's both a cost element and a time element, I think, for the Boardroom Apprentice. But I take your point, and it may, I wonder whether we can consider making it an option, subject to costs. Janet?
Yeah, no, can I just comment on that? It is a pragmatic approach, not least because of the boardroom apprentices. They normally have a full-time job, and to come to planning committee every month would be difficult. But also the timelines of when planning training happens, compulsory planning training for members is normally in the autumn, and the apprentice normally starts in January. And so they'd have missed the cycle of planning training. That being said, I do think that as part of the development, it's a good idea if the apprentice can find the time to observe as an observer at 1 or 2 planning meetings, so they understand the process. But I think not be a member of the planning committee. I think that's too difficult.
Completely agree. But I think it should be optional rather than mandatory, in order to be able to accommodate both costs and time and the rest of it. So, okay. Jenny Priestley.
Yeah, I really welcome this, and I think Mandy's a very valued member of the board that she's now joined. But in the light of the fact that we are going to be looking at very difficult finances going forward, can we just have an understanding of what the cost to the authority is for... I know it's stated in here, but it doesn't actually give us any sort of idea of figures.
It's probably deliberate. Lisa, do we have any?
Well, the only, obviously there's this sort of set-up cost that those for any member. So in terms of staff time, there's an element of that. The only other payment is the travel payment, which obviously varies depending on where the boardroom apprentice comes from. So it would be the standard member rate for travel, 45p a mile at the moment. So it depends where they're from and what travel arrangements there are, really, for the nitty-gritty cost.
So I think the reason it's not in there, Ginny, is because we don't know where the apprentice might be coming from, so we can't put a figure on that actual cost. It could vary from someone local to someone quite distant. One would hope that DEFRA or the appointing body would take that kind of thing into account, but there's no guarantee. Okay. Any other comments or questions, members? If not, Patrick, did you move the recommendation?
I think I did with that provision about planning.
Yep, thank you. Subject, is there a seconder? Janet, thank you very much. All those in favour, members? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's implemented. Oh, I would say that there will be, if the programme goes ahead, and if we get another boardroom apprentice, there will be a need for a buddy, but we aren't asking for members to volunteer until we have some certainty that those ifs have been met, so there will be some further communication.
If I could just add to that, I would strongly advocate for whoever is the buddy to be someone who's had a lot of experience in a board, because that's one of the big takeaways for me, was being able to rely on Janet's experience and knowledge was a hugely essential part of the learning.
Sure. Thank you for that. But that's something to come anyway. Excuse me. So in that case, members, we move on to agenda item 12, National Highways peatland restoration, and Matt is here to take us through that.
Thank you, Authority. Okay, so firstly I just want to say thank you for letting us bring this item to Authority rather than Resources Committee, which it would perhaps more naturally rest within. That's for reasons of time scales. As you will have seen in the report, we've really responded to a call for a tender that was released in August, due for awarding in September. So the next Resources Committee, being in November, would be an impediment to us accepting that if we were successful. So that's why it's here today. So it's an exciting piece of work, actually. We're looking to work with National Highways in relation to their strategic road network, and we've done a piece of work with them, feasibility study work with them, which has established, with relation to the strategic road network, that some of the risks and issues that they have to that network linked to climate change vulnerability find their origins in habitat degradation within the upland peatlands of the region. And that's an important point to have reached, and actually the fact that we've established a business case with them around that the better way to protect the resilience of strategic road infrastructure and other infrastructure more generally is first to try and work in the wider landscape and with natural processes as a better way of doing that over the long term. So it's been great to establish that, and off the back of that they released this tender opportunity to work on more detailed planning. So we've done feasibility stage where we've established this connection. The next stage is to work up detailed restoration plans along two road corridors, the M62, which is the only motorway in the country that goes over peatlands, and the 8628 corridor. And these are both areas of peatland with a lot of degraded sites where there's still a lot to be achieved, and where there's a significant amount of overlap to map between our existing partners and National Highways as a new partner, as a new funding partner. So fundamentally offering the opportunity to snowball funding and actually optimise delivery efficiency, delivery costs for all the partners involved. So I think National Highways have really seen that, and there's a really good opportunity to play their resources in with other partners, existing resources under our plans for working with water companies, for example. I'm pleased to say since we submitted the report, we've been successful with our bid, and that has been offered to us, so we're now under offer as we consider this today. And slightly different resolutions we've reworded these following some feedback just to aid clarity, so it might be slightly different to the ones you're seeing on the screen as well, but each member will have a printed version of the updated resolutions if you would just review those just for a few moments. Thank you. Is that okay? Yeah. So we'd like to do this piece of work, which will develop detailed restoration plans over a number of areas along those road corridors, and crucially within that there is an element of capital delivery, and that will be focused on areas that are going forward under the AMP8 water company funding within those areas, and work neatly in tandem with them. And it's good to have an amount of planning resource in there. That will be predominantly staff time for us to do that, but having some capital in is good as well, because we move from having established the principle of looking into the wider landscape for climate resilience type solutions to these types of infrastructure, to actually have a pilot where we've been able to do a site scale piece of work with National Highways, where they can learn, see how that works in practice, and actually see the benefit and return on investment for themselves. That's a really neat opportunity to sort of start this engagement with them, which we hope will extend possibly up to 2031. And they, similar to water companies, have an investment period. They call theirs the RIS, Road Investment Strategy Period. So that will be coming into what is known as RIS 3, which broadly is the same timescale as water company timescales for investment as well. So that's beneficial. So with this, we're also looking to have the ability to work with National Highways through that road investment strategy period, potentially up to £5 million, which would cover the restoration costs that would go into the detailed planning that we're starting off with this initial piece of work. Thanks, and happy for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I think congratulations on having won this element of the contract anyway. Ruth and then Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's great news. Matt, congratulations on the progress so far with this funding. It's just a question about, is all of the land to which this project refers to within the national park boundary, or does some fall out, straddle it? It's just a point of clarification, really.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Matt? Buckler?
Yeah, is there funding within this to sort of tell the story of this? Because the sort of this is a nationally significant bit of nature-based solution delivery, which would be really good to be shouting about. And I know how easy it is to get. Relatively easy it is to get capital funding for doing the works. Is there going to be capacity within this to support your comms team to do some really good stuff with National Highways around how we're going to be making the case to DEFRA for this sort of, or to DEFRA and the Treasury for this sort of work, particularly in the light of the things that the Treasury are saying around how important nature is in terms of development.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, it's a good point, and the answer is yes. We have got some resource into this project design, which will enable us to sort of share this piece of work. And I think you're exactly right. I won't say it's completely unique, but it's a moment at which a large infrastructure organisation is looking at its climate change vulnerability profile for its assets in the landscape. The point is that we've proved a concept here that actually vulnerability within those assets is linked to the wider landscape. Well, that's true wherever a degraded peatland is next to a road. So that's relevant entirely all the way up through the Great North Bog. And that's a point that I'm talking to members of the board about the Great North Bog, about that actually there's a scalability to this, and actually we should look to replicate this. So the learning is important. We do have some money within the project to communicate about it, and we've got some deliverables that we've agreed with National Highways on that. But we also know that they are excited about it. So, for example, I think on the 7th of October, I'll be speaking at their sustainability conference and sharing an update on this piece of work. We've also been connected to Rebuilding Nature, which was launched over the summer. And one of the co-founders of that is Stephen Elderkin. He is the Director of Sustainability at National Highways. And he's also part of I think a national infrastructure type group, which includes the likes of National Grid and others. So those groups are aware of this piece of work and the concept. So I imagine in time, yes, there's going to be opportunity for us to ask about doing some case study work with them and other things. But we've got some initial engagement in there that means we can start to talk about it. And I think that's something that will grow as we go along and as we've got, exciting things to share with people.
Thanks, Matt. Ken Rustage, did you want to say something?
Yes, indeed. I really welcome this.
Mike?
I'm sorry, again. I could have really welcomed this. I mean, a number of things around this area. I mean, the M62 is obviously outside the peak, but if you go from Crawdon, you're there 6 to 8, and then you go into the Isle of Skye, there's a significant piece there. But there's a lot of problems we've alluded to, the sheer volume of traffic. And I go on the M62 daily, and that links into the M60, and there's real problems with all that. But if we can go forward, as we alluded to earlier, and get this, and I think it's really important to restore nature, and with this initiative that you've got, that would be fantastic. And all that area, the Great Bog, it's a massive area along there. With climate change, it's really denuded. So we've got to, like I said earlier, we've got to think not just for now, but for future generations. We don't want to leave them, even worse mess than that we've created inadvertently, perhaps already. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken, for those comments. Nick Adams.
Thank you. Could I just ask if you could briefly outline why it is degraded and what are the how you're going to restore it and then maintain it? Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and be real quick. Matt might be able to be more concise than myself. The upland peatlands of the Peak District and South Pennines are surrounded by large centres of population on all sides, and historically, on the Manchester side, we had the textiles industry, coal-fired textile industry. On the Sheffield side, you had coal-fired steel industry from the late 1850s. And so, principally, there's a legacy of atmospheric pollution. So that is sulphur, oxides of nitrate and chlorides fundamentally interacted with rainfall, caused acid rain, acidification of the soils and water, and sphagnum moss, which is the building block of peat. Key species for that, many other species form peat as well, but sphagnum's the key one, is extremely sensitive to sulfur dioxide. And so almost uniformly at a landscape scale, we had a whole landscape stripped of its ability to form peat and remain resilient. So we have had extremely bare and eroding, degraded peatlands. And in tandem with that, we have a very high rainfall in the uplands. So exacerbating that, there's high wash and rainfall. So when it's been left bare, then there's erosion and gullying. That then affects hydrology and so on and so on. So unfortunately, we've had a suite of multiple drivers of degradation over a very long period of time. So our issues are fundamentally the lack of vegetation and erosion. They're too dry. And we have the wrong species mixture. We tend to have more dry heath vegetation rather than blanket bog vegetation. So that's it in a nutshell. Hopefully that's...
And so how do you restore it and maintain it? Presumably, the contributory factors to acid rain, they're not there now.
Yeah, we know from our water quality monitoring that actually the air's cleaner, which is good. And in terms of restoration, again, if I just explain it really simply, in effect, we stabilise the substrate, and we'll do that with a mixture of approaches, but predominantly we use chopped up heather brash cut from sites with lots of heather that's in need of cutting. That is spread by hand, and that provides a bit of a sticking plaster over the surface. That removes the wind and rain erosion. It also creates a bit of a microclimate between the mulch and the surface. That's then overseeded with a nurse crop, which are reasonably vigorous growing grasses that set a very vigorous root structure in that, again stabilising it. To get them to grow, we have to raise the pH, so some lime is added, and we add a little bit of nutrient in as well, with fertiliser, just to feed those nurse crop grasses. And they're just a tool. They're there just to get something growing, because moorland and bog species are stress tolerators in terms of their ecology, so they're not very vigorous growers, and they're not very quick to grow either. So by putting some vigorous growing things in there first, it gives us time for the less vigorous species to grow. And what we see over a period of years, sort of 3 to 5 years after that, is that the nurse crop disappears and we're left with a more characteristic grouping of species. Once we have those, we then do what we can to address the hydrology and raise the water table back up in the peat and keep as much water on the surface as well. So surface wetness is extremely important for the reintroduction of sphagnum mosses, and that's kind of the last stage, is diversification. So where we have got sphagnum absent, which is largely everywhere, we then put that in with plug planting. So there's a defined process: stabilising, revegetation, re-wetting, and then diversification.
Okay, thank you. Just thinking about the maintenance, you're talking about significant road corridors. Is there any issue from traffic pollution, runoff from the roads, obviously rubber and stuff that gets laid down on the road? And as Kath reminded me, air pollution. Have you found any evidence of dump fuel? Because the farmers tell me that they regularly can smell it in the atmosphere.
Oh, still on.
I'm sorry, presumably that would have an effect, environmental pollutants that are current, not historic.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're going to get to explore with National Highways as we go through this. So we've had access to their risk GIS, spatial information about their own risks, but they also have priority outfalls, where there's water quality issues off of their networks. And one of the things, it's a bit like, what I say to the partners sometimes is a little bit like speed dating, is that a need for our partners to get to know each other, because they don't realise sometimes they have the same issue, different symptoms in the way that they view them. We've already put National Highways and Yorkshire Water together, and they're talking about exactly that. They're looking at the priority outfalls and the pollution issues as the water company sees them, and National Highways are then mapping on all of theirs from their road network as well, and seeing where there's overlap, where they can work in partnership. So that's I'm really pleased about that, because it means, okay, they're going to work together talking about peatlands, but they're going to work together on other things now, because they've had this, in effect, we've speed dated them with one another, so they understand a lot more about each other's needs and wants and opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matt. I think we need to bring this one to conclusion. Though an interesting lesson in all the elements that go into these contracts. Matt, and then Ginny, and then we move on to resolution.
I was just going to say that I'd be delighted to propose it if that's allowed.
You moved it and seconded it. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That's approved, Matt.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate that. And I just want to say thanks to my team that worked on this bid and on that feasibility study. It was it's fantastic to have such a great team, and they've done a really nice job on it. So yeah, thanks all.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, members, we move hastily on to agenda item 13. In that case, the report from the Chair of Planning Committee. Patrick, over to you.
It's been a very quiet 3 months, Chairman. One meeting was abandoned entirely. The other agendas were relatively small. There were not what I might call notable planning applications beyond one we had to pave over large sections of the footpath system. In fact, they weren't even footpaths, they were routes that were used by the public across Kinderscout. Unfortunately, the system wouldn't run to a helicopter for us to do a site visit, so we had to do this one blind. But that will be an application which will help to conserve the damage that's being done on the top of Kinderscout. We had a particularly interesting site visit to a place called Sough Mill, which I'd walked past many times in the past, but not been aware of what was inside it. But it was a still operative mill with a huge amount of machinery and stuff inside, which somebody was actually converting into a house. And I think those members that were on that site visit were more than impressed by the enthusiasm of the applicant and what he was trying to do. There were, we've got two new neighbourhood plans on the way. Hartington's neighbourhood plan has now been through examination by an inspector and has largely been franked now with a number of amendments of the sort that you would expect, but that Hartington plan is now on its way to being in place. And the two Longstons, Great and Little Longston, have got together and said that they would wish to do a local plan. So that is a new one that's on its way. I think the most significant thing is here that over this last 3 months, there have probably been about, I think about half the number, might even be less than half the number of applications there were over the same 3 months last year. And the 3 months last year were considerably less than the 3 months the year before. So there is obviously an issue out there in the economy that is going to affect the way in which the planning service is going to be able to do its job in the future. But I don't think I can add anything more to the picture than that, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. We move on to agenda item 4, reports from outside bodies. There aren't any. So we can move on to agenda item 15, which is for Part B elements. So we have members to approve the draft motion to exclude the public from the... So can I have someone... thank you, Charles. Seconded, Janet. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? So that's